over, specifically the post-Zapad, Eastern Europe Security and Economy Brief. The big exercise Zapad, it's officially done. The surge part is over.
That's right. And that's really where we start, isn't it? We're looking at that crucial shift from the high-tension surge back to what the documents are calling stable, disciplined operations. You know, the steady phase, the immediate drama might be lower, but the real question for security, for logistics, for the markets is, well, what do these new routines actually look like on the ground?
Yeah, that framing seems spot on. The brief kicks off with that very punchy line, doesn't it? Saying the quiet skies right now are a maintenance job, not luck. It really sounds like the hard grind of just keeping things stable is really beginning now that the adrenaline's worn off.
Okay, let's unpack that. Let's jump right into how that stability is actually being built. So the immediate security picture, it feels calmer, maybe, but the documents really stress discipline, not relaxation. What details are jumping out at you about, making that temporary high alert into the new normal baseline?
It really is all about that operational discipline. The headline isn't about backing off. It's that routines lock in. So the temporary stuff, that's now just standard procedure. We're seeing specific things mentioned, like keeping up those layered CAPs.
Layered CAPs, combat air patrols, right? Yeah. What does that layering actually mean in practice? Is it just like more planes up there? Or is it more about different altitudes, different jobs all working together? It's definitely the structure and coordination. It's not simply volume. It's a structured presence. Often, different altitudes, specific sectors, making sure there's basically never a gap in the coverage. And this structure is really crucial for keeping up those high stakes, dusk electronic warfare procedures, making sure they're always staffed by fresh crews, that the procedures are never, ever dropped.
Right. And I saw that specific status update. No fresh Allied airspace breaches overnight, which sounds good, sounds like success. But then right away, it's tempered by the fact that the shoot if inside ROE, the rules of engagement, that hasn't changed at all.
And that's a really serious signal, isn't it? It tells us that even though the exercise is wrapped up, the perceived threat level and the green light for response, that hasn't been dialed back one bit. The structure's there to react instantly. And keeping that structure going, well, the report points out a huge human element challenge. Rotating crews just to clear fatigue. You simply can't run an effective security posture on fumes, on burnout.
And that reliability piece, that's why this matters so much to you, the listener. Whether you're managing complex supply chains or maybe just booking flights, the reliable vigilance means predictable risk. If the air patrols are disciplined and layered like this, then air travel, border movements, they have clearer, maybe stricter, but clearer safety boundaries.
Okay, so let's pivot a bit away from the sort of kinetic risks, bombs, border breaches, towards the invisible threats, because that's really where the operational focus seems to be shifting now. We're talking electronic warfare, EW, and specifically GNSS spoofing.
GNSS spoofing, global navigation satellite system spoofing. So basically tricking your GPS into thinking you're somewhere else, which sounds like a massive operational nightmare. And the brief even gives this incredibly specific timing detail, doesn't it? It says spoofing is most likely sunset, late evening.
Exactly. And knowing that specific window, well, that dictates your readiness posture. The practical impact is huge. Operators now have to basically assume their navigation might be compromised during those hours. It forces them into a kind of default low-tech or degraded mode.
Which explains why the source says degraded mode SOPs, standard operating procedures, stay standard for aviation and trucking. They just have to be ready to fly or drive without reliable GPS signals at certain times.
That's it, precisely.
That's got to be a major challenge, though.
Yeah.
Practically speaking, for, say, a truck driver on a border route, what does a degraded mode SOP actually involve? Are we talking paper maps again, or just how does it slow things down?
Well, it's a mix. The document hints at things like enhanced inertial navigation, fallback systems, very strict communication protocols. But the bottom line, it introduces friction. It takes more time. You just can't run commercial logistics at peak speed if you're deliberately building in buffers and checks, because you might lose reliable navigation. You sort of have to assume potential blindness, navigationally speaking.
Okay, that friction makes sense of where the money's flowing. The brief says ministries aren't waiting around. They're sliding early, safe money toward counter-UAS and repair spares. So the spending is very practical, aimed right at these low-level, persistent drone threats.
Yes, and what's really key here is that the procurement list seems to have converged across the Allied capitals. It's like they've agreed on a shared shopping list, focused squarely on countering drones. Sensors, jammers, CORAD, that's short-range air defense, but also, really importantly, operator EW training and, the unglamorous but essential stuff, spares. They're even trialing common TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures, so everyone's using the same playbook.
Right, getting everyone on the same page. And while all this tech defense builds up, they're also managing the story, the narrative. The brief mentions that low-grade NATO escalation chatter is still kind of hanging around. How are the local authorities dealing with that noise?
By focusing on clarity over just pumping out information. This seems like a really crucial point. Municipalities are apparently pushing back with very structured communication, sticking to one message alerts with confidence labels. It feels like a direct attempt to cut through the rumors, build local trust, and sort of inoculate against disinformation internally.
Okay, let's follow that money thread further, because security stability is one thing, but it needs to translate into, well, actual economic confidence, right? And this is where there's a core insight for you, the listener. What are the regional currencies telling us? The Polish zloty, the Hungarian forint, the Romanian leu PLN, HUF, our own?
Well, this is actually quite fascinating. What's genuinely striking is how resilient the financial markets seem to be against the immediate security backdrop. The currencies are described as broadly range-bound, okay? But the really critical bit is that the front-end yields are tracking EU prints more than security noise.
Let's just break that down. What does that mean for the listener when yields, basically borrowing costs, are following EU prints like inflation data or growth forecasts rather than the nearby military exercises?
Yeah, in simple terms, the markets are basically saying, look, we trust the bigger picture of the European economy and the decisions coming out of Brussels or Frankfurt more than we fear the short-term military stuff on the border. They seem to have priced in the security risk as a managed routine, not some looming catastrophe. Like, the market's almost bored by the sound of jets if inflation is still the main game in town.
Wow, that is a huge vote of confidence in this steady routine we've been talking about. What about costs on the ground, though? Operational costs?
We are finally seeing a bit of relief there. The brief notes, diesel premia on frontier corridors are easing versus peak exercise days. So that's good news for anyone trucking goods. However, insurance is acting like the canary in the coal mine, systemically speaking. Insurers are staying cautious, keeping modest surcharges through month end. They're signaling, okay, the immediate crisis passed, but the underlying risk, that still costs extra.
And the way governments are buying things also reflects this longer-term stabilized view, doesn't it? Moving away from rush orders. The brief mentions framework deals favored over one-offs.
Absolutely. Framework deals, they give stability, volume guarantees for both the buyer and the supplier. And connecting back to that counter-drone priority, there's this growing focus on making the defense supply chain itself more efficient. They're setting up monthly delivery SLAs, service level agreements for drones interceptors. This kind of operational rhythm, it really confirms that defense buying is shifting from an emergency footing to just regular scheduled supply chain management. It's becoming, boring and predictable, which is exactly what you want.
Okay, let's talk mobility. For anyone listening who needs to actually move people or cargo around the region, what does this security normalization mean for borders, airports, that sort of thing?
It means gradual normalization, yes, but those time buffers are still absolutely essential. Belarus crossings, for instance, are noted as seeing gradual normalization, but the advice is very clear. Plan plus 20, 45-minute buffers today. So still add extra time. The good news is that rail and intermodal freight seem to be running pretty close to their regular schedules.
And what about the corridors heading towards Ukraine?
The brief describes them as stable with periodic inspections. That's pretty much the expected baseline now, with humanitarian lanes still getting priority naturally. Air travel is listed as ops normal, but there's a quick reminder that the NOTAM playbooks, the notices to airmen, they're kept ready for any mass strike nights. So the system's running, but contingency plans are very much live and ready to go.
Right. Okay. Let's try and tie these threads together, the operational, the economic, the security, using that SEALE quick insight map that was in the source material. Seems like a good way to synthesize all the different stakeholder needs, starting with SN stakeholders.
Yeah, the map does a good job clarifying who needs what. So for residents, it's about getting clear need-to-act alerts, not just noise. Logistics firms, well, they want those predictable buffers we just talked about, linking right back to border crossing times. And SMEs, small and medium businesses, they're watching the bottom line stuff, fuel insurance costs.
And then C, constraint flip. This points back to the communication strategy we touched on. Clarity, volume, fewer, crisper notifications beat drip feed nudges, really hammering home that shift from crisis chatter to just high confidence necessary alerts.
Exactly. Then A, for analogy, which I think is maybe the most useful way to think about this whole situation, the guiding principle for the entire flank is treat it like winter ops, slow, layered, disciplined. It's sort of about accepting things will be slower, maybe more complex, but ultimately reliable because of that structure and redundancy, like driving carefully in snow.
Makes sense. And finally, E for edge cases, those unusual high-impact scenarios that need specific preparation.
The document flags two main ones. First is spoofing during medical evacuation, medevac. That's obviously a super high stakes situation where dodgy navigation is just completely unacceptable. And second is debris, false alarms, and low density areas. These can trigger huge responses, unnecessary mobilization if the initial checks aren't really robust. These are the kind of subtle, tricky risks that pop up when the big picture stabilizes, but the tech threat just keeps humming along at a low level. Hashtag tag outro ad.
So if we pull all this together from our deep dive today, the big theme seems to be this demanding but apparently successful shift from surge to steady. The focus now is all on reliability, on discipline, on managing expectations. The security layers seem locked in, and maybe most tellingly, the markets are treating it like a manageable routine risk.
That really is the core takeaway, I think. Success is now measured by that quiet reliability, keeping the patrols up, keeping the operational buffers honest, as the brief puts it. But for you, the listener, the brief points to three really specific things to watch in the next, say, 48 to 72 hours, things that will signal what's coming next.
Okay, what are those three immediate indicators we should all be keeping an eye on?
First, watch the redeploy nights. As units stand down and move out, keep an eye out specifically for any border-skirting UAVs or short EW spikes. These could be the sort of last gasps of that higher tempo activity or testing the new posture.
Okay, redeployments. Second, back to the money.
Yes, the safe sequencing. Look for the first concrete purchase notices coming out. The order they buy things in, do they go for sensors first? Or SRAD systems? Or maybe expensive munitions? That order tells you a lot about where they think the most immediate vulnerability lies.
Interesting. And finally, looping back to that macro picture.
The macro glide. Keep watching for any rate path hints into end September, specifically for those currencies, the zloty, the forint, the leu. If those front-end yields keep tracking the EU data and ignoring any lingering border noise, that's basically the market giving its final stamp of approval on this new steady state.
That's a really clear set of things to watch. It all circles back to that opening thought, doesn't it? Quiet reliability isn't luck. It's a constant maintenance job. Thanks for walking us through this deep dive today. We'll definitely be watching those three indicators.